Rules Committee will come to order, and I want to welcome everyone back from a week-long work period week. And as Louise, as I can see, we got a stack of work ready for us, ready to go this week. It is heavy lifting. This afternoon, the Rules Committee will meet to consider two important pieces of legislation. First, the committee will hear information about H.R. 4660, the Commerce, Justice, State, and Related Agencies Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2015. This represents the third appropriations bill this year and highlights House Republicans' commitment to an open and transparent appropriations process. This legislation provides $51.2 billion to fund vital law enforcement and public safety efforts while promoting initiatives directed to job creation and economic growth. I want to thank Subcommittee Chairman Frank Wolf, a very dear friend of mine from Virginia, and Ranking Member Chaka Fattah for their diligent work on this bill. I believe it's important to note, Mr. Chairman Wolf, that you being up here this year is an important year in your life and the life of this Congress. And I want to thank you for your service to this great institution and for your hard work throughout the years of me being in Congress, knowing the kind of work that you do, and I want to thank you right up front for that service. Next, the committee will begin consideration on H.R. 4435, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2015. This legislation ensures that our nation's military has the resources necessary to fulfill its mission, that is, to protect the United States of America, its citizens at home and abroad, and to make sure that our friends around the world are well taken care of and protected also. I'm proud of this year's NDAA work and the work that will ensure adequate levels of troop readiness, reduces bureaucracy, log jams to improve our nation's military effectiveness, and fulfills our promise to support our soldiers and their families. In a few minutes, the gentleman, the Armed Services Committee Chairman Buck McKeon and Ranking Member Adam Smith will be here before the committee, and I want to thank them for their incredible work, the work that they do together to make sure that this work is not only timely but close to the mark so that the policy of the United States Congress is properly taken care of. I also want to thank Chairman McKeon for his years of service. As I previously said about the gentleman, Mr. Wolf, their years of service not just to this institution, the people of their district, but really people who love freedom and who expect the United States Congress to have professional attributes about itself. Finally, I want to let everyone know that today's hearing on H.R. 4435 will be limited to general debate. The Rules Committee will meet tomorrow for consideration of amendments. With that said, I want to thank my colleagues for joining us today. Obviously, Chairman Wolf and Mr. Fattah are at the witness table and prepared and ready today. I've welcomed them already, and I want to give the same opportunity to the gentlewoman, the ranking member of the committee, Mrs. Slaughter, for any opening statement she may have. Gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand that CJS is going to be open rule. It's going to ask for an open rule, are you not? Which is wonderful, and we're happy to hear that. So I have no discussion on that part of it, but I do want to take this opportunity to tell Mr. Wolf, who I've served with since I first got here, that you've made a wonderful difference here, Mr. Wolf. The things that you've championed and the things that you do, and you will be sorely missed. The kind of advocacy you do is unfortunately not universally loved. Thank you for standing up for the good things all these years.
Joe William yields back her time. Thank you very much. I'm delighted that both of you are here, and I think a few minutes ago, as I greeted you, I spoke with you about how important your testimony is before the Rules Committee. Both of you represent not just $51 billion worth of American taxpayer spending, but really the opportunity for you to bring your hard work, your work that you have done together to this committee, to present it in such a way not just that we can understand it, but understand the priorities and those things which you believe the Rules Committee should be attuned to. I do admit that today is a comeback day, a week late, or a week after our work period, that we have many members who are arriving late this evening, and so normally you come before a full Rules Committee. but I'm delighted that both of you are here without objection. Anything you have in writing will be entered to the record, and I would first like to acknowledge and yield time to the gentleman from Virginia, Chairman Wolf. Mr. Chairman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. I'm pleased to bring the FY 2015 Congress Justice Science Appropriation Bill before the Rules Committee. We've done our best to work within our allocation.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if you could pull that, it's on. If you could pull a little bit closer to you, you're on TV, and we want to make sure that we can hear everything about you. Thank you very much.
The recommendation includes $51.2 billion in discretionary spending, a reduction of $398 billion, or approximately 1% below the current fiscal year level. The bill includes several reductions from lower priority programs and rescinds over $469 million from prior year program balances. The bill restores damaging cuts proposed in the President's budget for federal law enforcement and also for NASA. For the Department of Commerce, the recommendation includes $8.4 billion, including strong funding for the National Weather Service and satellite programs that provide data for accurate forecasts and have saved a lot of lives around the country. We're also investing in manufacturing, export promotion, and job creation, including a task force to incentivize U.S. companies to bring back their manufacturing activities to the United States. For the Department of Justice, the bill includes $27.8 billion, including increased funding for the FBI to continue counterterrorism programs and to prevent and investigate cyber intrusions. And today, the Justice Department just brought a case against 5 Chinese individuals on cyber attack, which is very positive. Funding for state and local justice grant programs is reduced overall, but high priority programs continue. Burn Justice Assistance Grants and State Criminal Alien Assistance Program, better known as SCAP. Also, funding is included above the current level and above the President's request for violence against women programs, for combating human trafficking, and for addressing DEA testing backlogs at crime labs and law enforcement agencies nationwide. For science, basic scientific research and science education fuel innovative and competitiveness and contribute to long-term economic growth. For the National Science Foundation, the bill includes $7.4 billion to set the groundwork for the development of new technologies and support science education programs that will ensure a skilled workforce to improve our competitiveness. For NASA, the bill includes $17.9 billion, an increase of $100 million also for aeronautics research. Bill also supports the upcoming flight milestones for NASA's Orion crew vehicle, a space launch system, restores proposed cuts to NASA's science missions, including planetary science missions to Mars. I also want to thank Mr. Fattah. We have worked very, very closely together on all of these issues, and I want to thank him for the great close working relationship, and also the entire staff on both sides of the aisle for their good work. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fattah, thank you very much, and I'm delighted that you're here, and welcome.
Well, I'm honored to be able to appear before the Rules Committee, and both you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member. But I'm even more honored to sit beside Chairman Wolf and have sat beside him for these many years as he's shepherded this bill through this process. And we have never appeared without a bill that was, bipartisan, and that is the case here. He has just provided extraordinary leadership, and there are items in this bill from human trafficking, which he has championed a major effort throughout the country on, and a number of other items where he mentioned the indictments today in terms of hacking. I think it's safe to say that none of this would have happened without his insistence over many years around this issue when others were not paying any attention to it. Frank Wolf was in the lead. And I know it's unusual around here when we're talking about a member of the opposite party, but Frank Wolf has been an American first in every single instance. And so even though he might be on the other team, he's been a leader for our country on cyber, on human trafficking, on human rights, So the bill today is $51.2 billion. There's significant numbers in here that are important to our country. I want to spend a minute and just talk about the law enforcement, Justice Department investments because it's important. Attorney General Holder did a video throughout the DOJ complimenting Chairman Wolf and myself for the work we've done because it's lifted a 3-year hiring freeze and it's been able to make sure that in each of these agencies throughout DOJ that vacancies can be filled and that the needs of the country in terms of law enforcement can be met. And again, Chairman Wolf has been the strongest advocate, whether it's the FBI, the DEA, and all of the other law enforcement entities, the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, to make sure that these FTEs were filled, these full-time equivalent positions were filled. And so I think that's important. Of particular importance to me has been inside DOJ, the youth mentoring investments in the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Mr. Chairman, something that you've been quite interested in and supportive of. But for the Boys and Girls Clubs and all the other youth mentoring groups, because they've been able to build out these programs over these years, and including this one, because above the President's requests, the Chairman's mark makes an investment in the country's future, and I think it should be noted. And working together, we've launched the first ever high-priority brain research initiative, neuroscience initiative, that has, over the last few years, already produced very important objectives in terms of bringing some 20 federal agencies together, having them lay out a disruptive path forward in terms of breaking the code on some of the 600-plus diseases and disorders of the brain. On manufacturing, the Chairman has helped lead the way in terms of repatriating some of the jobs that have been lost to other places around the world back home through programs through the Department of Commerce. And Select USA has gotten the support. I will rest my case on just this, the NASA investment. So in space technology, $600+ billion investment here, commercial crew, the science accounts and education accounts, so very important. So I want to thank the Chairman. These allocations are tough, but we have put together a bill that I think that as we go to the floor, the House will be proud to support in terms of the investments that are being made in education and in science, and of course with National Weather Service also getting a major kind of support here to both the satellite programs the Chairman mentioned, but to their other weather forecasting activities. So it's been a pleasure to work with Frank Wolf as Chairman. I've learned a lot, and we're going to move this bill through conclusion this year, and knowing that even though it's his last bill, it's not the last we're probably going to hear of Frank Wolf on the critical issues of the day. Thank you.
Mr. Fatah, thank you very much. I'd first like to ask a question to the gentleman, Mr. Wolf. You're closing out your career. You've had initiatives during the years that you've not only been this subcommittee chairman, but also helped us in other efforts. But in particular, with this CJS, you have put your hand on that your colleague has said, great job. What are the things that I need to know to be looking forward to so that next year, whoever is here, we can ask them and know and follow the tracking that you've started? For instance, trafficking of women. That's not a new issue, but that is an issue which you have excelled in, among others. So, Mr. Chairman, if you could take just a minute and give me my prescriptive viewpoint so that I'm able to follow this through.
Well, I'm sure whoever takes that spot will do, what they think is appropriate. I think the area of the FBI, cyber, because if you go out, and I would urge every member to see it, you can go to a location in this area whereby you can look and see the names of every company that's being hit. Every major American company, the Chinese are stealing technology. But cyber and counterterrorism, also the Weather Service. Mr. Nunley came up to him the other day and said had the funding not been there, it actually saved lives in Mississippi and in other places. Also the human trafficking, the very thought, just in Northern Virginia alone, we had a group called Polaris, look to see how many places young women were trafficked, sexually trafficked in Northern Virginia. 81 places. I had a group come by to see me from my church asking me to go on a bill to deal with sexual trafficking in Thailand. But I said, it's in Tyson's Corners. It's in Annandale. It's all over. So in the whole area of sexual trafficking, and lastly, in the area of manufacturing and repatriation and bringing jobs back to America, many of these jobs have been taken out. And now the Chinese government is fragile. Environmental issues are big problems. The Chinese people want freedom. In fact, is in 20 years, China will probably be the largest Christian nation in the world. They have 25 Catholic bishops under house arrest, and Protestant pastors are up in arms, and they're ready to kind of change this government. So it's time to bring business back into America. So there are some of the things. And lastly, and I give Mr. Fattah all the credit, the whole issue on the brain. You don't know, you can't talk to somebody who hasn't had a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's, tumors, and Mr. Fattah has taken this initiative, and with regard to the brain. But there's just a couple of issues, but I'm sure the next member will sort of have their own priorities too.
Thank you very much. Mr. Fattah, you spoke about NASA mission, $600 million, and what you are looking for them to accomplish with their mission. Can you take just a minute and talk with me about that?
Well, it's very, very important that our country understand how important having NASA at the very forefront of technology and innovation. So pushing the envelope. You know, we have now privatized low Earth orbit travel through the administration and Congress's cooperation in the leadership of Frank Wolf. We now have multiple companies who are flying cargo back and forth to the space station, and will soon be flying crew. But there's, I was on the floor of the mission control when the Mars rover landed after 8.5 months of travel. To put a human being on Mars is what the goal is. And it's going to take a lot of know-how that we don't presently have. So we're building the biggest rocket ship ever. And it's an investment we need to make as a country to continue to lead in science and technology. It's not so much about what we find in space, but by finding our way to space, we find technologies that enhance America's ability to lead globally. And so, and we have, we've kind of put on the side some of this for too many years. And I would say all the way back to the previous efforts where we have not made the investments we needed to make going forward into the future. So we're very pleased with the investments that are being made now. There's a robust budget here for NASA, but there's a lot of work for us to do if we want to inspire our kids in STEM education. One of the things that we know inspires them is space exploration and human space flight. And even though a lot of them won't be astronauts, they will study math, they will study science if our country points the way.
Most interesting. I spend time with the gentleman, Science Committee Chairman Lamar Smith, on a regular basis, and it's a regular discussion in the Texas delegation as we talk about the attributes of NASA, what the mission is, and moving forward. And I well remember one of my favorite movies, The Rocket Boys. That's a generation that I grew up in, and Lamar, Chairman Smith, is well aware that we need to give a vision out there of math and science and the attributes therein. And I appreciate you, each of you, working to fund those initiatives that he's not just that he supports, but that I think we can get us back on a STEM attribute to where people who are in second, third grade, first grade understand what we're trying to do. I think we've gotten away from seeing these things. I saw where Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., Inspector Erskine of the FBI, passed away a week or so ago, 95 years old. I grew up in an era where the FBI was on Sunday night, and I watched NASA and these attributes of hard work and honesty and moving forward as character traits of our country affected so many people, and I do appreciate you paying attention to that and encouraging that with the vision also. Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your recognizing me. I want to thank our colleagues also for the work that they have put into this bill, and I particularly appreciate the cooperative nature of the presentation that was made here today. And I'm a huge fan of Frank Wolf also. We were together the other day, and I said we had a wolf and a fox in the house together. So we're going to have to find somebody to replace him so we can continue that tradition. But we all know Chairman Wolf has done a fantastic job in his tenure here in the House and is a great role model for all of us. And I appreciate also the emphasis on NASA and on STEM programs as somebody who's been pushing the Skills Act significantly and knowing that we have a lot of jobs out there that aren't being filled in this country, that people with the kind of background that the various STEM programs have present maybe could do a better job of filling them. I do have a concern that we have 209 different STEM programs in the federal government. I think our money would be better spent if we could do something to consolidate those programs and possibly get to the students even earlier than we do now. Someone who's spent a lot of time in education over the years, but I know that's an area where we truly need to be working. And so I appreciate the emphasis that you all have put on this. I would like to take a point of personal privilege, Mr. Chairman, and recognize a guest that I have here today. Reverend Charlie Martin is going to be our visiting chaplain tomorrow. And I asked him a few minutes ago if he'd like to sit in a little bit on the Rules Committee meeting, and he said that he would. And I also have Javier Sosa, who is one of Chairman Ross Leighton's constituents, a graduate of Yale University, who's been doing an internship program with me. And this is not his first time at the Rules Committee, but he said, "Can I stay too?" So he's obviously a glutton for punishment. So, but I'm delighted to have Pastor Martin here. He's from Watauga County, my home county, and lives way out in the country. I mean, far out in the country. And I'm delighted that he's here, but he's a very astute person and cares a great deal about our country and what's happening. So I'm delighted that he's spending some time with us here in the Capitol. And with that, I have no questions of our colleagues, and I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentlewoman from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to add my welcome to the guests. And in a strange twist of irony, in my home district of Rochester, New York today, a young woman was sentenced to prison for straw purchase of guns that she made, high-powered weapons that she gave or sold was more like it, I suspect, that gave to a felon who had served a lot of time for killing his grandmother with a shovel. He killed his sister, 2 firemen, and grievously wounded another fireman on Christmas Eve in Rochester 2 years ago. And so it makes me really sad to think that the amendment that you had, or actually I guess it was from the administration, to ask that gun dealers notify the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms when they sell 2 or more certain high-powered long guns to the same buyer within 5 days. I don't understand the logic behind not allowing something like that. I think the statistics show now that fewer people are buying guns, but the people who buy guns are buying more of them. But we're particularly sad in our district, and I don't think they're going to be very happy to find out that something that would have kept that young woman from being able to do that was turned down by this committee. I hope we can do better than that. Really, the idea that it would burden small businesses, I can pretty well assure you that the business that sold those guns in Rochester would have appreciated the burden. They wouldn't have minded it a bit if they could have saved those 3 lives and that other fireman from awful pain. Mr. Fatah, you wanted to say something?
Well, this is a matter that came up in full committee, and there was an amendment offered. It was not successful in full committee. But under the rule that we seek, an open rule,
We can bring it up.
it will be brought up and aired again on the floor. And
Oh,
the issue is,
the public wants this.
but there is an attempt by the leadership of the committee, including Chairman Wolf, to try to work through some of the challenges around this. But this was fully debated in the. This is an action that the administration has taken, and which I support. And I think there should be notification, but the Congress has to be able to work its will in this matter, and the votes may or may not add up in the same column that we might want them to at the end of the day.
But it's important to try.
That's the beauty of an open rule. You got to congratulate the majority for providing an open rule.
I'm delighted
so that
with
all of these issues, whatever they may be, are aired.
Very good. Thank you both.
Thank you very much. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just was also going to congratulate the majority for pushing for an open rule, but since Mr. Fatah has already touched on that, I don't have anything to add. It means a lot to me that folks do as much work as you all do on the Appropriations Committee, and you don't come up here and say, we're the best of the best, and we've perfected it, and so there's nothing left for anybody else in the Congress to add. Time and time again, you put in the late hours and the long days, and you still encourage your colleagues to, if they have something that they believe will make it better, to give it a shot on the floor and let the votes fall where they may. And that always means a lot to me, and I appreciate that again today. Thank you both.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman, Judge Hastings. Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I thank both Mr. Wolf and Mr. Fatah for their presentations. And I'm appreciative of many of the measures that they have put together, but I do have 2 concerns that I would like to ask them about. One is the $15 million cut in legal services. And I understand our fiscal dynamics in this country, as do all members of Congress. And I also understand that we have to make priority determinations. But I know the good that the legal services program does in this nation, and I'll be specific about Florida. In an article in today's newspapers in Florida, discussion is ongoing regarding the fact that these cuts are to take place and that legal services are going to have to put people out of work. There are 400 legal services employees in Florida, and according to the cuts as proposed, 24 of them will lose their jobs. Florida, as many states in the nation, but I specifically know about Florida, does an incredible amount of pro bono work through members of the Florida Bar. The Florida Bar also has a foundation, and it, along with some state funds, which I might add were also out of the state budget, legal services were cut insofar as what the state offers in this arena. And a proposal which I don't have strong feelings about as a member of the bar. Our dues are $265, and they've been that way for a very long time. And a proposal to come up with an additional $100 per member is being discussed on both sides, people for and against it. But some of those funds would doubtless help the foundation, which is nearly deplete because of its support of legal services. So I'd like to know how you all came to that determination, and more important than even that issue, or as important as that issue. All of us know that millions of Americans live in coastal regions. And we know that storm surge and the rise in sea level increase the likelihood of coastal flooding. Yet the committee abandoned research in efforts that I believe that Americans greatly need. Am I correct that the cut represents a 24% decrease from 2014? And am I correct that it is more than a third, or 37%, of difference between the administration's request? And I hesitate to get too far into the weeds on this business about climate. One of my colleagues in the United States Senate has set off a good deal of controversy regarding his comments, part of which he's walked back, regarding climate. As a person that has been born and raised in Florida and witnessing the deterioration of the coast, witnessing substantial increases in flooding as late as this past weekend in Miami Beach, Hollywood, Florida, countless other places where we experience this rather substantial increase. I don't know whether it's the moon or the mountain or what's causing it, and I'm not about the business of trying to get into any discussion about whether humans or anybody else caused it. The fact is it's happening. And the fact is that your committee cut the research in this arena, and I'd like to know why, as it pertains to both, as each of you would, if you would be kind enough to address it. I would appreciate it.
The committee is faced with a zero-sum game. We were given an allocation, and for every dollar that we give to one place, we take away from another place. The funding for the National Science Foundation is at an all-time high. It's never been higher. This country, we are facing decline. Decline is really a choice. Decline is not a destiny. We are not destined to decline, but we can make a choice whether we're funding it. We have added in money that the president has taken away with regard to NASA. If we fall behind, the Chinese may very well beat us back to the moon. The Chinese may very well beat us to Mars. We have record funding above the administration's request on human trafficking. For a young woman or anyone to be taken in and to be exploited, so we are above there. We are above violence against women. For too long, I think there's been an index. So it is a zero-sum game, and we've tried to treat everyone as fairly as we possibly can. But at the end of the day, we're given so much of an allocation, and everything we have to do fits into that allocation. If NASA falls behind, we're in trouble. Lastly, we plussed up the National Weather Service. Many people before they go to bed look at the weather to see what it is, but also many people were saved in Mississippi, in Alabama, in many other parts of the nation, in Oklahoma. And so we just looked at the priorities based on how much money we actually had.
Let me say it like this, that we're in a process in which the administration has made a proposal. The House will work its will on this bill. The Senate will come forward with a proposal, right? So in many categories, our proposal is above the administration's request. So whether it's youth mentoring, or whether it's brain research, or whether it's National Weather Service, or whether it's minority business development, I could go through a list of where it's above, and then there are cases where it's below. And then there's some places where real priorities have been determined. So human trafficking is got a major increase in this bill. Aeronautics safety has got a major increase in terms of people flying and the safety of the flying public. But also in this process, there's a process that will emanate with a final bill in which I can tell you, as we sit here, Legal Services Corporation will be in a stronger position than it is today when we join with the Senate to have a final bill. So, but there is a process in which the House has a set of priorities. The House has a majority, and that majority has a set of priorities. And what we've been able to do here is to find a way in which we could put together some Democratic priorities with Republican priorities, come up with a good bill. It's not a perfect bill, and it's not the same numbers that some other group of people who sat down would come to, but it is the beginning of the process. The Senate will pass a bill, and if you look at how this has happened with legal services over each of these years that I've been ranking member, at the end of the day, I think we'll be in a better position when we come to the end of the road than we might be at this moment. But this is a substantial improvement over where the bill was at subcommittee as we go forward now.
I don't deny what either of you said, and I have a keen appreciation for it and appreciate the fact that you all are operating with a zero sum finite amount of monies, and I understand that. The problem that I have and will continue to have, and while I'm appreciative of what you've done with NOAA, if I were on the committee, I probably, not out of any parochial interest, but because I believe it's important, particularly in the environment we're in with Russia and China, especially Russia now having said that at the end of 2020, we won't be able to use their rockets, and they're inclined, it seems, to not want to go forward with the efforts that some in the world thought that were cooperative with the undertakings ongoing there. But I come down to just the fact alone that a lot of poor people can't afford lawyers, and a lot of poor people need lawyers. And therefore, I would have argued somewhere that I could find funds to come out of other areas of commerce and justice to ensure that legal services would be fully funded. And I appreciate where you're coming from, Mr. Fattah. I've seen that same dance. But in the environment that we're in, headed into the 2014 elections, I'm not sure that dance is going to stand up to the tunes that have been played previously. So I have an ongoing concern there. I can't express to you, the two of you and anyone, how important the coastlines of the United States of America are, and not just Florida, but the entirety of our coastlines. And I defy anybody to tell me that any of them are being built up in any substantial way. When I flew out of Fort Lauderdale today, I looked over. I was on the left side and able to see probably as much as I would look north, almost all the way past Pompano Beach. And it's amazing how many times I've looked there and how much there has been a diminution of soil on the ocean in spite of all of our efforts. And I'm not kidding you, for all the people, and I'll tell my Senate friend, he evidently doesn't live in Miami anymore, because all he has to do is be there, and he will see the flooding that takes place in an area that he represents. Now, I don't know how it got caused, but it's happening. And that happening needs to be abated, and the only way I know that we can do it is with the kinds of things that you all have done in research and in other areas. And so I made my statement, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and I'll just say in conclusion, the chairman and I voted for Simpson Bowles under the notion that we felt we needed to get our fiscal ship in order, but we were in the distinct minority in the House, Chairman Wolf and I, when that took place. In that, the reality of these allocations and not being able to meet all of the nation's priorities is because we have not come to grips with how to rebalance the fiscal ship of the country in a way in which we can make the investments that we need to make. So, we're not going to be able to lead the world on the cheap, and we're not going to be able to continue to protect all of the vital interests of the country unless we have the dollars at some point to do it. We're operating in a $51.2 billion allocation, and within that construct, this is the bill that we're presenting.
Well, Congressman, I understand what you're saying, and I understand where the two of you, who I would not lay any accusing finger on being hesitant to do what's necessary to help the people in this country. But I just want to share with you what the statistics, they say, prove just about anything. But to turn away from where you are and to make just brief mention of the fact that the COPS program, which I also know has done an awful lot of good in our communities in this country, is also being cut. But just to highlight something and to begin to wonder, we dodged the issue. In getting our fiscal house in order, we have to make a determination as to whether or not we want to pay now or pay later. And so when the deal goes down, there are people in this country who have benefited substantially from the policies that we have enunciated here. And I'll give you an example of something that just causes me agony beyond reproach. And that is, the President proposed, and several of us, and doubtless both of you, believe that all children in America ought to have an opportunity to have the experience of going through kindergarten. And I saw a statistic just this past weekend, and if it's true, then every hedge fund person in this country stands accused of not wanting to pay the necessary taxes that would allow for that. 6 hedge fund managers, 1 month of their salary would pay for the entirety of the kindergarten program. Now, we can keep putting all the money in the hands of a few liberal and conservative rich people, and I'll tell them that they will eventually, they all have bodyguards, but they're going to need a hell of a lot more bodyguards going into the future to protect this country, their country, that they pretty much own and manipulate the hell out of all of us in the first place. All right. That's all. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Nugent, is recognized. Gentleman seeks no time. The gentlewoman, the young chairman from Miami, Florida, is recognized.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to give a special shout out to Congressman Frank Wolf, who's been such a leader on the human rights issues. We've had a good working relationship in the Foreign Affairs Committee and the group that he co-chairs with our colleague, Mr. McGovern, the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. And he's been a leader throughout his tenure in Congress and has been the conscience of the House. And we will miss his solid values and principled stance on issues that impact the downtrodden and those who feel like they have no voice. He gives them a voice. So thank you, Mr. Wolf, for everything that you've done. And on a personal note, I want to point out 2 of our great interns who are here, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Megan O'Dwyer from Virginia. It's a good Hispanic name. And Cameron Silverglate, another Hispanic name there from Florida, from Debbie Wasserman Schultz district. I don't know why they're all in Debbie's district. Come on down. But thank you, Megan, and thank you, Cameron, for being with us today and for helping us out all the time in our office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, and we're delighted that you're here with us today. You need to come up here more often. The gentleman, Dr. Burgess from Louisville, Texas, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I, too, want to add to the accolades for Chairman Wolf. Certainly, he has been a friend for the last 10 years, and we'll miss you, Frank, in your role as subcommittee chairman, but just as a friend on the floor. Can I ask a question about Title III in the appropriations bill that deals with space exploration? Mr. Hastings made the point that after we will reach a point where our ability to co-travel with Russia to the space station will be exhausted, and will we have a way of moving our personnel back and forth from what has been a significant investment made by this subcommittee over the years in the space station? Clearly precedes my tenure in Congress, but it is a significant investment, and we do want to be able to see our scientists continue to participate in that endeavor.
We may have a problem. Administrator Bolden, when he testified at that time, did not feel that we would have a problem. But if you look at the comment from the Russians in the last 2 weeks, they are going to cut off 2020. We do rely on the Russians. It should not be there. We have funded these programs at a very high level, but it could be a problem. It could be a problem. And I think the problem developed several years ago when a certain rocket was canceled. But so I think Charlie Bolden would be able to give you a better example. He believes they're going to work it out. He believes this is important to Russia as it is to us. But if you believe in what the Russians have been saying, it could be a serious problem in 2020.
Let me just say, Doctor, I believe that we are fastly moving to a position where if confronted with this problem, America would be in a position to respond. I went out and visited the SpaceX development program out in California, where their cargo rocket ships were being fitted for human occupants, and they've been testing out their systems. And I think Orbital Science, which is in Virginia, is also developing their capabilities and doing some testing. So, you know, one of the things that might be helpful to our country is to be presented with some challenges. And, you know, it would put on a quicker pace, perhaps the fact that, but the idea that American ingenuity can't figure out how to take human beings to and from the International Space Station is defied by the facts. We had a shuttle mission. We know how to do it. We made a conscious decision in the 2006 CR to move in a different direction. The shuttle fleet was old. It had to be based on the examination that was commissioned under the previous administration because of the safety issue. It was decided that the shuttle fleet had to be put to bed because it was getting old. And but even during that whole period, we were flying most of our astronauts through. Russia was delivering them. We were delivering cargo and the build out for the space station using the shuttle. But I think we're going to be in a position to deal with this challenge. And I also think that the other issue that's really confronted here is the use of the Atlas rocket, the Russian-made rocket, and whether or not we're going to use an American-made engine at the end of the day is going to be the next issue as we go forward. So, but this is it's a challenge, but that's when, you know, you get a chance to figure out, that's what adversity is about. It's about, and it helps you figure out who exactly you are. And I think America can meet this challenge.
Well, I appreciate your confidence. I hope that you're correct. Thank you, Chairman. I'll yield back.
I'm not just saying. I went out and visited. I've seen the work. And I've seen the success and the build out on this.
Gentleman yields back his time. I want to thank both of you on behalf of the committee. You both have not only presented yourself in a thoughtful and articulate way, but I believe that you represented your work and defended it very well. I know, and you know, that there are people who serve on this committee and who serve as your colleagues that have ideas that make your job even more difficult. But to defend what you do in the context that you have put it in, and especially doing it together, is important. It's important, I believe, for the American people not only have confidence, whether it be in the Department of Justice or the Secretary of State or in the Department of State or in Commerce Department. Each of these are very vital and crucial areas to the success of this great nation, and it makes me feel proud to know that both of you are not just working together, but having to find better ways to do, I guess, what could be said more with less. Thank you for your presentation today. If you have anything that you want to leave in writing, we'd love to have it into the record. You're both excused. Thank you very much. I'd like to join in what has been said about our visitors. Reverend Martin, thank you very much for taking time to be with us today. We normally have a lot of fun up here. Today is just fun, but we're delighted that you're here. And for the interns, Megan and Cameron, who are here with Eliana, Congresswoman Roslayton, thank you for helping us with some work today. I know that there was no free lunch today. You probably didn't even get lunch, but I do appreciate you coming up and trying to work with us so that we would be able to accommodate, including our next two witnesses, two very dear friends of this committee and your colleagues that are here. Mr. McKeon, we're delighted that you're here. I see that you got your name on the front of your work. I know that often we do put our names on our work, but this would be in reference to your final term in Congress, your service, not just to the people of your district, but the people of this country and the men and women who serve in the military. And I want to join, and I'm sure as we go around the room, your colleagues will acknowledge your strenuous support of the men and women of the military, the purposes of thoughtful content as you go and sell what we do to the military and work with them on getting things better. And so we're delighted that you're here. Mr. Smith, you're a locker mate of mine downstairs, and I see you on a regular basis. But I want to say that I have watched you and Mr. McKeon on TV, and you both represent this body well. You're thoughtful, you're careful in your thoughts, and I think meticulous in the product that we expect to see today. And I want to thank you both for being here. If you have anything in writing, that objection, that'll be entered to the record. The gentleman, the chairman, Mr. McKeon, is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for those very kind words. Chairman, Ranking Member Slaughter, thank you for meeting today to discuss our National Defense Authorization Act for 2015. I, in particular, would like to thank my partner, my ranking member, Adam Smith. We've had the opportunity now of working together for 4 years. And it's really been delightful. He does not back down one bit from his positions. He argues very strongly for the things that he believes in. In fact, we almost had a blow-up in our markup, and we backed off and fixed it. And I think that Ms. Slaughter, your side should be very happy with him as the ranking member. Well, thank you. But we, I think, really have had a great relationship, and I'm hopeful that you'll continue that as you go forward, because our committee, members of our committee, understand that we really are working for the men and women in uniform. We really are working for the national defense of this nation, and so everybody on the committee understands that, and that's how it's been for 52 years. And we've passed the bill every year. Sometimes people think that because we've done it for 52 years, it's just automatic. We do it, and it just happens, and it's expected. But I think we have great staff, and they do a tremendous job in preparing things so that when we finally get to markup, it looks easy, and it's not. It's because they do a tremendous job of laying the groundwork, and that's all of our staff. In fact, I think if Adam and I were in a room and all of our staff was there, we couldn't tell you which ones passed the first few probably are Democrats or Republicans. We don't deal in that. I'm proud of the bipartisan, transparent, and inclusive process that our committee undertakes each year. Our mark is the result of diligent bipartisan oversight that's been conducted throughout the year. It was made available to the public 5 days in advance of our markup. Likewise, all of our markup sessions were open to the public, and video was streamed live. 195 amendments were offered, 95 by Democrats, 100 by Republicans. Of those, 154 were adopted. The NDAA passed out of committee with unanimous support, 61-0. One member left early, went home, went to bed. In the interest of time and looking forward to your questions, I'll provide a short summary of the bill. Our NDAA this year will authorize $521 billion for national defense and an additional $79 billion for overseas contingency operations consistent with the 2013 bipartisan budget agreement and the House-passed budget. It maintains the ban on earmarks. The bill provides our warfighters, veterans, and their families with the care and support they need, deserve, and have earned. It continues to advance our committee's efforts to prevent sexual assault in the military, increases troop pay, and curbs increased out-of-pocket expenses for military families. It provides our warfighters with the resources and authorities they need to support an enduring mission in Afghanistan, to continue pressuring al-Qaeda and its affiliates. While the bill reflects difficult choices given limited resources, it preserves key warfighter capabilities and ensures our armed forces are ready and capable to meet current threats while preparing for future challenges. The bill guards against achieving false short-term savings at the expense of vital long-term strategic capabilities. It also recognizes that we must get more defense for the dollar and therefore includes provisions that tie into the committee's recently initiated comprehensive defense reform effort. One thing I want to say, and I think it's, we faced very difficult choices this year based on the Budget Control Act, based on the lack of resources, and my principle that I've tried to stick to in pushing forward this year is keep as much as we could. We were given a budget by the Secretary and the Chairman, the Joint Chiefs, that cut more than we cut. And I understand what I'm hoping is that next year, hopefully, we'll do something about sequestration and get something that we can work with better. Otherwise, next year is going to be very, very difficult. With that said, I look forward to a robust debate on the House floor this week. I respectfully request that this committee issue an appropriate structured rule for this legislation that allows for full debate on national security matters while respecting the House ban on earmarks. I also ask that the rule provide all necessary waivers for prompt consideration of the legislation and that the rule provide for at least 1 hour of general debate. In addition, I ask that the rule provide authority for amendments to be considered en bloc. Thank you for the ability to testify before you here today. I look forward to working with you and the members of our colleagues in getting past the 53rd consecutive defense authorization bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We're delighted, Mr. Smith, that you are here, and the gentleman is now recognized.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that, and I just want to start by echoing Buck's comments. It's been great to work with for the last 4 years. It's a point of pride in our committee that we produce a bill every year and we work in a bipartisan fashion. Neither one of those things are easy. And Mr. McKeon has really continued the tradition of, I'm sorry, and Buck has continued, it's on. Sorry. It's all right. Buck has continued the tradition of working in a bipartisan way, and I very much appreciate that. And I'm always honored to be able to co-sponsor the amendment to name this bill after Buck. He's served Congress very well, and particularly this committee. And by and large, I agree with his comments about the bill, about the importance of it. It continues to fund our troops who are still at war in Afghanistan. The other thing that I really like about this bill is it recognizes that our challenges right now are primarily from terrorism and asymmetric warfare. It therefore prioritizes the Special Operations Command and also cybersecurity threats. I think it sets the right priorities in that regard. The chairman does correctly point out the challenge going forward. The defense budget is vastly less than we thought it was going to be. You can argue over what's a cut and what's a reduction and an increase. But 3 years ago, we thought we were going to have a lot more money this year than we do. And certainly if sequestration comes back next year and sticks around for the full 8 years, there is going to be an enormous amount less money than what was planned for 3 years ago. That means we have to make changes. The administration put forward a series of changes in a bunch of different areas. They proposed a BRAC. They made reductions in certain compensation. They, were going to lay up 11 ships from the Navy, discontinue the A-10, and several other proposals to try and make sure we're rearranging the Guard and Reserve issues. For the most part, the committee got rid of all those changes, found the money creatively for 2015. The problem is it creates a bow wave. 2016, 2017, we're not going to be able to do that. So I do think that as we go forward in this process, Congress, House and Senate, if we don't like the cuts that the administration put out there, we're going to have to put up alternatives. And it's worth noting that the administration asked for $28 billion additional dollars. They acknowledge that the budget that they were handed to from the budget agreement from this body 2 years ago or a year ago for 2014 and 2015 didn't give them enough money. But that $28 billion is not forthcoming, so they have to live within the budget that was presented to them. And I don't think it's helpful for Congress to duck every single one of those hard choices and just create a bigger bow wave down the road. I am going to have 2 amendments on that. One, to put forward a BRAC. I know BRAC isn't popular. I also know of no rational argument against doing it other than, oh my goodness, I don't want them to close a base in my district. And when you're facing the types of cuts that the military is facing, understand if we don't do the BRAC, estimate came out today that there's $6 billion a year that the military spends on installations and facilities that they do not need. That money comes right out of readiness. It comes right out of our troops. So I think that's a choice we're going to have to make. I'm going to offer up the BRAC amendment, also offering up an amendment on the Navy's plan to lay up 11 cruisers and 3 amphibious ships in order to save money on the Navy side. If we want 11 carriers, we got to save money somewhere. And by not doing that, by not laying up those 14 ships, we are raiding the ship modernization account to keep them going. And that account's got $2 billion in it. It won't a year from now if we don't do this layup. So there are choices to be made. I look forward to the debate on the floor, but I agree with the chairman. Once again, I think we've produced a good product, and we never forget that underlying this bill, it is the support for our troops and their families. Passing this bill continues to give that support, and I urge us to do that. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Both of you spend a lot of time dealing on issues notwithstanding with the military, but also the men and women and their families. And I know that each of you, each year you come up here, you speak favorably about not just the interaction, but favorably about how proud we are of those men and women. And I know during the hearings that you have regular visitors. I would like to acknowledge, if I can, a gentleman who has just come in to be a part of this hearing, to watch this hearing. He's from the United States Army, the 82nd Airborne, Specialist Stefan Levon, I believe, if I've pronounced his name right, who is joining us. And for those of you who may be watched on C-SPAN, this young man who's walked in here appears to be a double amputee. He is a man who has served our nation, and I'm delighted that he is here today. We will not have him come and make testimony today, but him being here on behalf of not just his branch of service, United States Army, but also representing what I grew up with, and all of us understanding the 82nd Airborne as an important component of our fighting force. And the men and women, representing the men and women of the United States military today. So, Specialist, we want to thank you for being here today. The debate that is going on is one where we're trying to determine the policies as we move forward in this next year. And it is the gentleman from Washington and the gentleman from California, the ranking member and the chairman, who are bringing together a bill which was unanimously reported out of the committee. And so it's important to note, as you are here today representing the military, I think it's important for us to note that we're trying to work together. The military looks at Congress to do the funding, to work on the policy, and I'm delighted that you're here and joining us together today. Thank you very much, sir. I've got a question for each of you. Mr. Chairman, over the last few years, your colleague on appropriations, Mr. Culverson, and you last year spoke about DOD and the medical records as it's related to them moving this transition to the VA. Can you give me an update about that? Not the VA side, but the transfer of records and that process that's going on. And really questions both of you, but Mr. Chairman, I'd like to yield to you first.
Do you have any new? We have had a couple of meetings with both secretaries and with both committees, and it's a very difficult thing to cut through that bureaucracy. The major jurisdiction is with the Veterans Affairs Committee. The problems that we've been reading about lately, but we have worked. It seems to me that it's a very simple thing. When somebody joins the military, a record is created, and it would seem that it would be possible when they're discharged to just transfer that record to the VA. For some reason, it's not that easy to do. And they are now, Bob tells me, moving our records electronically to the VA. That's a big step in the right direction. I think when you talk to members of the Veterans Committee, you'll find that's a huge bureaucracy over there, and trying to get them all to even talk to each other is part of the problem. Do you have any more to add on that?
No, just to say that we're not where we need to be. And, the electronic medical records have not met their promise at this point, primarily because systems do not properly communicate with each other, and that's true between the DOD and the VA. We're working on the problem, but we got a lot of progress to make. As Chairman said, there has been some, but we got a long way to go. It ought to be seamless. I mean, one of the hardest problems is, when you move out of the DOD, benefits, a whole lot of things transfer over to the VA. We have got to have a better method for getting those records over there. Electronically is the best way to do it. We've just got to get the systems talking to each other.
From time to time, which means at least once a year, when you come up here, I know you hear from members about their own ideas and their own attributes about the things that they hear from people back home. I would like to, once again, without being on record, to tell you I spend a good bit of time in Dallas, Texas, with veterans, members of our military, people who have served our country honorably. And it wasn't back to a World War II record. It was over the last 4 or 5 years in their service and trying to document what they've done and move forward. And I will just tell you, you're in more meetings than I appreciate the time that you do spend on this issue until it is not just resolved, but until it works the way that you think it ought to. I trust both of you, but I remain very skeptical of the Department of Defense and the VA in their effort to effectively deliver what they said they would do. That's not a hit on either one of them. It's simply a work in progress, but I hope that you will, and the committee, and certainly the staff knows this, stay after this. There are too many people who want and need this to be fixed faster. But I'm in favor of doing it right, and so I hope that your attention to that detail will be accomplished. And I look forward to watching the results of what you do. And I know you want it just as much as I do. Second matter is one that you can either comment on or not, but our great nation was rocked once again when the occurrence of the military shooting occurred in Fort Hood, Texas. It also happened up here, right 2 miles from the Capitol. It's happening in and on military bases. And I'm very much hopeful that the Department of Defense will have a chance to come up with better answers. I think it's not surprising sometimes that a person or two have lost their way and would take it out. I'll call it workplace violence. I can understand that. But for 10 and 12 and 16 and 18 people to be gunned down without defending themselves is a problem. I was in Kabul this week. During the break, I had a chance to be with lots of men and women, a good number of them from California, as always, a bunch from Texas. And I do recognize that they are in a, while not a war theater, they're in a war zone. But virtually every one of them, to a person, had their weapons on them. And I believe that there has to be a look at a policy because of the problem. And that policy, I would hope, would be something that you would be a part of. I do not know the status of that. And if either of you would choose to speak about that at this time, I welcome that. Otherwise, I'll let gentlemen, no one wishes to speak at this time. Thank you very much. I would defer to the gentleman from Georgia. Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all. Thank you both for your work. We don't have many bills that were unanimously reported out of committee, and I know that doesn't come easy. It comes hard. I'm holding the President's Statement of Administrative Policy. It's the longest veto message I've seen in my 3 years here, and mentions exactly the.
It was just as long last year, if that makes you feel any better.
I will have to go back and kind of hits those issues that are in fact what you would expect folks to struggle with, whether or not money can be spent to move Guantanamo detainees back to the U.S., whether or not compensation should be slowed for men and women in uniform, whether or not changes should be made to the Army Guard and a system in the absence of a commission report. I want to touch on that one just for a moment. I've certainly heard a lot from my guardsmen and reservists back home, folks who love this country and want to participate in doing whatever's right, whatever the right answer is, but are wondering if we're dealing with a budget-driven strategy or a strategy-driven budget, and certainly prefer that when it comes to the national security of America, we're dealing with a strategy-driven budget, and they feel like, and certainly our community agrees with them, that they are a vital part of making that a success. I don't know the challenges that you all face making an entire authorization bill come together, but it means a lot to me that with all of the competing pressures that are upon you, when men and women from back home, who you know have a love for this country, a love for our armed forces, speak out and say we're concerned, we may be moving too fast, we may be moving too far, we want a pause, that you all have been willing to listen to that discussion. I'm grateful to you for that. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's just the problem on the budget thing is, as I said up front, the administration has said that they want more money. So yes, the budget is impacting our strategy at this point. But, that's a choice we all made. I'd turn sequestration off tomorrow if I could, but it's there. So they have to make the decisions in response to that. And on the Guard and Reserve, they've put forward a plan in terms of personnel and in terms of moving around their air assets that is set in place to save $12 billion over 5 years. And I've met with and fielded several phone calls from my adjutant general in my state. And what I've said is, if you don't like that plan, give us another one that saves the same amount of money. Because that's where we're at. We're not in a position to get rid of cuts and not find savings. So that's the only challenge we have, is the budget challenge. But keep in mind, this is the number that Congress set, and sequestration is going to keep coming for 8 years. So if we don't want to see that happen, we'll have to make some changes here legislatively.
This will be the last NDAA bill where I'll get to visit with the chairman on this. It has made my 3 years in Congress easier, knowing that your hand was at the helm there. We've battled sequestration being one of many very difficult issues that we have struggled through, and having your voice there was always a comfort, because for all the different directions folks are pulled in, I have never seen you pulled in but one direction, and that is advocating on behalf of the men and women who voluntarily serve in our United States forces and promise to keep this country safe each and every day. I'm grateful to you for that singular focus, and I am grateful to you for your counsel during these years I've had in Congress.
I've told people I'm leaving Congress. I'm not leaving the fight. As long as I have breath in me, I'm going to be arguing for more money for defense, because I look around the world and I'm scared. I mean, we talk, you can look at the whole Middle East. You can look at what Putin's doing in Russia. You can look at the problems that we're having with China. I have people almost daily when I'm here in Washington come into my office from around the world, defense ministers, members of other legislators, and they all have the same question: where is America? Are you going to be here? They see the cuts that we've made. When in 2010, we made a pledge before the election that we would cut everything. We understand we're in serious financial problems. And we, the Republicans, wrote a pledge that we would cut everything but Homeland Security and Defense. We had 87 freshmen come to town and say, no, everything's on the table. Not all 87, but enough of them, that we have since that time cut over $1 trillion out of our defense for the last couple of years and going forward the next 8-10 years. You don't make those kind of cuts without seriously cutting our ability to defend ourselves and our interests around the world. And I had the Secretary of the Navy and the CNO and the Marine Commandant in, and they were explaining to me how we're growing our Navy. The Secretary said, you know, we're growing the fleet. And I said, explain that to me. And so he tried to explain cutting the 11 cruisers out of our 22 cruisers. We're just moving them into a modernization. We're taking them offline, and then we're going to, I said, at the end of the day, we're going to have 11 less than we have right now. Well, no, he said, we're going to modernize 11, and then we'll put them back in as we take the other 11. Yeah, we're going to have 11 less. I turned to the CNO. I said, how many ships do we have? And he said, 283. I said, how many are we going to have next year? 273. If you go back a few years and look at the QDR, we're supposed to be trying to have 313 or 330. I mean, a lot more ships than we have or are going to have. And in the meantime, the same thing. We look at the Pacific, and the president talked about a pivot to the Pacific. Everybody in Europe, when they come in, says, "What does that mean? Are you leaving? You leaving us? You leaving Europe behind?" No, it means we're also going to put more emphasis on the Pacific. But the PACOM commander explained to us the size of the Pacific. He said, you can take all the land mass on the Earth and put it in the Pacific and have enough room left over for Africa, and another Australia. And we're going to be taking care of that with less ships. Next year, he'll have 130 days where he has no aircraft carrier. And you know, these are the ways that we calm problems. I had a member of the Japanese legislature came in, and he's laid out to me how much the Chinese have been encroaching into their airspace and how it's really accelerated the last few years. And he showed me a chart. Last time he visited, he's been 4 times in the last year and a half. And it went from about 4 or 5 years ago, 18 times they had to scramble their jets, to this year, 400. So he says it's to the point now as high as it was during the Cold War. So they're concerned, and they want to beef up their defense, their ability to defend themselves, because They don't think we're going to be there if we need them. I think Taiwan is concerned. South Korea is concerned. You know, it's a very difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And I voted for sequestration. You know, we had a choice. Most of our votes aren't black and white, and you can just vote for a good thing or a bad thing. It's choices that are difficult. In that, if we hadn't voted for that BCA, the government would have shut down. I was assured by leadership that we would not have sequestration. Well, we got it, and we got it in spades, and we're paying the price. And those of you who are going to be here, I'm leaving. But I'll tell you, if you don't fix sequestration next year, and if we have to, next year, I've had a lot of members come up to me, and they're very concerned. They're concerned about the National Guard. They're concerned about the reserves. They're concerned about the Warthog. They're concerned about drones. They're concerned about their bases. They're concerned about lots of things. And all I can say is, as bad as it is now, next year it won't even be comparable. We truly will, next year, hollow out our military. And I just hope that some way you'll be able to work out something and change that next year. Otherwise, we will no longer be the power that we are right now.
Well, I know the chairman will join me in holding you to that commitment, that even as you leave this body, you don't leave that fight. You'll just leave that contact information as you walk out the door. I'm sure you'll find your phone ringing on a regular basis as particularly the younger members try to struggle through that and want for your expertise. Thank you very much for what you do. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back some. Gentlewoman is recognized.
I thank you both, and Mr. McCarron, I don't know if you know it or not, but last week I praised you to high heaven on the floor. I hope that hasn't hurt your reputation. But I really so much appreciated your statement about that we did not need more Benghazi studies here. We were just debating the select committee. And I understand that one of the committees is going to do it yet again is subpoenaed Secretary Kerry. I don't know how people get their work done when they're constantly called up before committees here over and over again. But about today, I understand exactly what you're saying, but we are obliged by treaty, are we not, to fight for Japan if anybody attacks them?
We have
and South Korea and Australia for reasons I've never understood.
We have 7 treaties. 5 of them are in the Pacific.
Right. So if they're worried that we're not going to be there, I'm worried as how we're going to pay for it. I'm really concerned about that because we have schools and highways crumbling all over the United States. We can't have high-speed rail anywhere in America. We're so far behind our airports. We built one airport from the ground up in the United States since 1972, Stapleton in Denver. We've neglected ourselves so badly. So I really appreciated what the first George Bush did in the Gulf War. He said, well, if we're going to go fight it, you have to give us money. And they help pay for it. Maybe you ought to look at something like that again. But do we need more aircraft carriers, you think?
Pardon?
You want more aircraft carriers?
More?
How many do we have already?
We have 11.
And they've cut
by law,
one,
we have,
I understand, is that correct?
And by law, we're supposed to have 11.
Yes.
They did not cut one.
And the A-10 and the U-2s, you believe that they should still be produced? A-10 and the U-2.
Uh-huh.
I understand that those were recommended by the administration to do away with.
Yeah, and I support the administration on that. We are different.
Do we really need those? I remember when they did the V-12, and they said that the only time they could ever really have used that to any advantage was during Vietnam, and it was way too late when we started building them. But I do appreciate, and I've known ever since I got here, that if you build everything for defense in over about 400 congressional districts, it's going to be very difficult to try to cut the budget.
I'm reading a series of books right now on World War II.
Yeah.
And we were all in World War II.
Right. And we had a draft.
I was a kid.
Yep.
We went from a very small military to a very large military
It was cavalry at the beginning of the Second World War.
very quickly. We did that. But we lost a lot of people.
We did.
We were putting soldiers, it makes you want to cry reading those people that got sent over there that were going through northern Africa and then through Italy and then D-Day, and the number of people that we lost because of lack of training, lack of leadership, lack of resources. There were people that landed and their guns didn't land. I mean, you know, we don't want that again. Nobody wants that. And yet we did it again in Korea. And then every time after a war, we've taken our military down, and then we pay the price. They pay the price afterwards because they have to kind of build back up. We built 86,000 planes in 1 year in World War II.
But we don't need that now. It looks to me as
Who
though,
knows what we need?
Because it seems to me that we're getting so mechanized and so high tech.
We can't do a thing right now to stop Putin. If he wants to take all of Ukraine, he's got it.
Yeah, he pulled back. It's all over the place. I mean, there's no
That's right.
about it. I
That's
agree
right.
with you on that.
And they didn't. A few years ago they didn't do that.
But it shouldn't all be on our taxpayers, on our men and women that volunteer to go. And you know, we were talking about the VA a little while ago, and I really think this statement needs to be made. My district, I already had problems with the VA when we just had some Second World War veterans left, Vietnam, Korea, Gulf. And now in this 10, 12, 13 years of war that we've had, we have maimed between 46,000 and 50,000 young Americans with life-altering wounds.
No, we haven't maimed them. The enemy has maimed them.
We sent them there.
We sent them there for a purpose, and they've done very well, and we should be proud of what they've done and what they've accomplished there.
I'm proud of what they did.
But we didn't maim them
for us. But I will tell you that we have to be prepared to pay for that, because what the Veterans Administration, the contract that we made, is the cost of doing war. And I have felt for a very long time that the whole Veterans Administration should be under the Defense Department, because that's where the money is. And we should really be able to take care of them. But in any case, we have this bill before us today. And I do want to ask unanimous consent to put the administrative statement policy in. There is no veto
Without
message
objection.
here, by the way. As a matter of fact, let me read just the last paragraph. He didn't say a thing about vetoing. He's not terribly happy. Right here, right here.
It bills for them.
Oh, right. Okay, it does say, I'm sorry. But what he says here, that he looks forward to working with Congress to address his concerns because those are constitutional concerns, including the respect to the President's constitutional authority as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. So let me put that in the record. And I yield back my time.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. The gentleman, Mr. Nugent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And having, excuse me, having served on the Armed Services Committee now for a year and 4 months, it's really been an honor to work with both the chairman and the ranking member. It's great to hear from time to time a little banter go back and forth between the ranking member and the chairman, but it's always done, I think, with such decorum. You can have differing ideas, and you can have a differing idea of how to get from point A to point B. It doesn't make either one of them righter or wronger than the other. It's just a different viewpoint. I'll be honest with you, I've heard a lot from Ms. Slaughter that really biting my tongue on some of it. But first of all, I want to go and I want to thank you for your service. You know, I've had a son that has served in 82nd Airborne for 6 years. He's currently still active duty Army. And he was deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. But for the grace of God, he came back whole. And there's been so many of our young men and women who have volunteered to go into harm's way for this country and for their fellow soldiers, I will tell you. In talking to all three of my sons that served this country, They do it for their battle buddies, for the guy next to them or the girl next to them. They do it for that reason, to make sure that they come home. We have been blessed in this country in so many ways. And I will tell you that the armed services, I think, get sometimes not their just due in regards to how you've put us in a position to have all the things that we have today. Going back to, whatever war you want to go back to, those men and women made the sacrifices so a lot of us could stay home. Only 1% today serve, and they do it with great distinction, I will tell you. And I'm very proud, obviously, because I have 3 sons that all are HUA, Army, and they love what they do. Because otherwise I don't think they would do it if they didn't. But the Armed Services Committee has tough choices to make from time to time, and I will agree with the chairman. I voted for sequestration. It was probably the worst vote I ever made. As it relates to our military, as it relates to our armed services, it is put us in a position, and Mr. Smith hit on it earlier, that, we've done some things, I think, to get us through this upcoming year, but after that it looks bleak. When you look at what's going on in the world, it is not safer. And we had Admiral McCraven testify in front of the committee. He's in charge of Special Operations Command. And he was very clear and distinct in regards to what Special Operations can do. And that there are a number of folks that think Special Operators can do it all. But like he said, it can't reopen the Straits of Hormuz if closed down by Iran. It can't push back South Korea or North Korea if they invade South Korea. It can't do the things that a major military force can do. And all the generals that have testified in front of our committee, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think they've all said that we've done a terrible job in the past in predicting our future combat roles.
No, they said we've done a perfect job. We've been wrong every time.
I stand corrected by the chairman. So when people say, hey, listen, don't worry about it, it's all going to be asymmetric warfare, that may be true. But then again, it may not, because when you see the resurgence of Russia and then you see what China's doing, and today I believe they indicted 5 or 6 Chinese military officials for espionage in this country as relates to our businesses and our corporations. When you see what's going on with Russia, and particularly where they are in regards to the Black Sea, and the denial that they have now of the ability to deny us because of having Crimea, access to the Black Sea, it has not gotten safer. And, Chairman, I worry just like you, and I believe Mr. Smith does too, because he talks about the same issues about sequestration. You've been here longer than I have, and I hate to see you go, because you add a lot of experience, I guess, in regards to how do we move forward. I worry about all the classified briefings that we sit through and that we can't talk about here, and about the threats that face us. I had a son just come back from Africa, and he said, Dad, he said, and they were training Ghanaian forces in Africa. And he said, the Chinese are operating strongly in Africa. If we pull back from the world front, and I absolutely agree that we shouldn't be the world's policeman, but if we pull back, and this is just my humble opinion, that there are so many other actors out there that will fill that void, whether it be China, whether it be Russia, or some other state actor, that it's going to put us in great jeopardy, and particularly our friends. And we've heard from our friends, and I concur with your statement, Chairman, that they're concerned about where are we going to be if needed. And we can have great intentions, but if we don't have the ability to project the force forward, we're going to be in precarious position, I think. So it's really not a question. It was more of a statement. I just want to thank both of you for your leadership on the committee, both from the minority side and the majority side. It's been a great year and 5 months, I will tell you. The markup that we just went through is painstaking, to say the least, in regards to all the amendments that are offered by all the members. And tomorrow I'm going to get to handle the rule, I believe, as it relates to the amendments. And that is a process in and of itself. So I want to thank you so very much. And Mr. Chairman, once again, I want to thank this young man for his service to our country. And lastly, on the issue of the VA, you know, we pre-fund the VA. I don't think the VA has been turned down on a budget request, but what we have seen with the VA, and I think all of us as members have had to deal with it, is how they deal with our servicemen and women when they need them the most. And I think we're seeing that come true now in a number of instances throughout this nation, whether it's in Phoenix. We just had an issue down in the Gainesville VA hospital, but there's others across the nation that are coming forward. And I think it's just horrendous that it's not a lack of money. It's a lack of accountability and a lack of direction by the VA to make sure they're there for guys like you. And that's is my heartfelt thoughts on the issue. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I want to thank the gentleman. Mr. Chairman, as you know, the gentleman, Mr. Nugent, accepted the assignment to come to your committee. We felt like I did, Speaker did, that we would be better served. And, of course, you see the kind of service that he's given a member of the Rules Committee to be a part of your committee, and I appreciate the gentleman's comments very much. I need to notify the committee the gentleman, Mr. Smith, left as excused. He received notice that he needed to go to the White House. He was going to vote and leave, so I gave him permission to do that. I normally do not do that. He and I did not have a chance to effectively communicate, but we did communicate, and so he has headed off. And I want everyone to know that he was not leaving for any other reason. I believe he's been successful at his testimony up to now. But I would direct the committee to understand that that he did have to leave and was not for any other reason. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Hastings and I are at that same meeting. So with that,
as the gentleman controls his time,
I will yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. Judge Hastings.
I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The gentleman from Orlando, Florida, Mr. Webster, is recognized. The gentleman has no question. The gentleman from Louisville, Texas, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I didn't get the invitation to go down to the White House, so let me just say I want to thank the chairman for his service, because we are going to not be able to rely on his services after this term, and that's too bad. The country will recover, but it will be a struggle. Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for inclusion of Section 571 under Section H, which deals with the Purple Hearts for the soldiers that were wounded at Fort Hood in November 2009. This is important to us back in Texas, and I appreciate the careful wording of the amendment so that it does not alter the importance of the Purple Heart Award, but at the same time recognizes the sacrifice that those individuals have been through. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you once again, not only for the work that you've committed to on behalf of yourself, your district, but also the hard work for the men and women of this great country. And you will be missed. You have done an awesome job, but you also deserve a chance to move forward. And I know Patricia will be delighted to have you home. I will miss her also, but we're delighted. Thank you for taking time to be here today. The gentleman is now excused. I would like to also acknowledge, I know we acknowledged a specialist Levon, who is here, Bert Caswell, our dear friend of every single member of Congress, is here and accompanying, as he does so often, members of the United States military, men and women from around the country who have been in service to this great nation and are currently either at Walter Reed or Bethesda. And I want to thank Bert for being here today also. You're next. Excuse, Mr. Chairman, if you choose. I would now be in receipt of a motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 4660, making appropriations for the Departments of Commerce and Justice, Science, and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2015, and for other purposes, an open rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule waives points of order against provisions in the bill for failure to comply with Clause 2 of Rule 21. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. The rule authorizes the chair to accord priority in recognition to members who have pre-printed their amendments in the congressional record. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 4435, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2015 under a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the amendment in the nature of a substitute consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-44 shall be considered as adopted, and the bill as amended shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill as amended. The rule makes in order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. Finally, the rule provides that no further consideration of the bill shall be in order except pursuant to a subsequent order of the House.
You've now heard the motion by the gentlewoman from North Carolina, which is home to the 82nd Airborne Division. And I would yield to the gentleman from Georgia for an explanation of the rule.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll see what you expect here, an open rule for CJS appropriations, and what might be unusual, just the beginning, the authorization for the general debate, and 7 initial amendments for NDAA, 4 from the Republican side and 3 from the Democratic side, to get us started tomorrow until the committee has time to go through the remaining 300 amendments.
I thank the gentleman for his explanation. In fact, as the gentleman did explain, we will be back tomorrow at 3 o'clock to consider the other amendments which no decision has been made on, but this was to allow the opportunity to get started on the floor and a chance to try and give a more fuller opportunity for debate. With that said, you've now heard the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Is there discussion or amendment to that? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Mr. Woodall will be managing for Republicans.
Mr. McGovern.
And Mr. McGovern will be managing for Democrats. I would like to once again reiterate our just awesome thoughts for the gentleman from the 82nd Airborne who represents the United States military today, the Rules Committee. Mr. Levon, I want to thank you for taking time to be with us. We had a debate, we had a discussion, and I hope that you will be able to know to your colleagues, not just in the 82nd Airborne United States Army, but also in the military, that the men and women of the United States Congress are thankful and respectful of the service and the things which have happened to you in your life, and we will continue to follow them. and thank you for being here today. Does the gentlewoman wish to be heard of at this time or for anything further? Thank you very much. Any other member of the committee? Thank you very much. We'll now be we've completed our work for the day, and we will meet tomorrow at 3 o'clock p.m.